the Darwinist is here saying stupid ANCAP shit. It's so funny. I think one of the funniest things about ANCAPs is they have all these arguments, but they never did any study to actually understand how anybody else's thoughts work. That's the thing that always blows my mind. It's like ANCAP arguments against anarchism are just unanimously demonstrations of their own ignorance. And I don't understand how can you live your life not knowing how anything works? Like, how can anybody like tolerate being an ANCAP? You have to essentially be purposely ignorant of how everything works. And I just don't understand, how do you live your life that way? Like, if you're going to criticize anarchism, why don't you try to learn what anarchism actually says? Like, clearly it shouldn't be intimidating to you. Like, why don't you just try? Go actually read anarchist texts, because I don't know, the shit you're saying up here, it just demonstrates your ignorance. And that's why ANCAPs don't convince anarchists. Like, there's no pipeline from anarchism to ANCAP ideas. And that's because once you've learned what anarchism is, anarcho-capitalism just clearly is not persuasive. The arguments that anarcho-capitalists have against anarchists are all straw men and based in the ignorance of anarcho-capitalists. But like, how do you live that way? Like, how do you actually live not knowing how anything works? Like, isn't it frustrating when everything in the universe doesn't work how you think it will? That's what seems annoying to me. You know, like, so much of my life has been, I want to be right about how the universe works. And so I've gone about trying to study how the universe works. And if I find that something about my predictions is wrong, if something about my framework doesn't make sense when I compare it to the universe, I question my framework. But it's like, ANCAPs, I don't understand how you can live being wrong all the time. How do you live when everything you predict is always wrong? Like, I just couldn't imagine tolerating that on a daily basis. And I don't know how you live like that, but it explains how y'all live in like this fantasy world, essentially. Like, you live off in fantasy land about what you think will happen. And you have to, because you can't live in the real world. If you lived in the real world, you would have to confront the real world and your ideas would just completely crumble. So you have to live in this like fantasy land of what you think maybe things could be like. And it's funny because then every single time that your ideas are actually put in place, what you think will happen doesn't happen. Instead, catastrophes happen. And instead of going, man, maybe my ideas, my foundational ideas were incorrect. No, that never happens. Instead, y'all just go back to the fantasy. And that's mind blowing. I mean, damn, you even got Millet? Oh, Millet. Yeah. Oh, I mean, everything you predict is wrong. Like, everything. So you could instead maybe give me one thing that was correct. That would probably work. Because like, Austrian economics is probably the most debunked conception of the world ever devised. It literally just does not work. Look at all of Argentina. It is pure refutation of Austrian economics. It is a demonstration that your deregulationist conception of how capitalism works is just complete falsehood. And here we are, that Argentina needs to be bailed out now. They used your politics. They used your economics. Your economics were used in Argentina. And look what we got. We got Millet being bailed out by the American government. What's that about? How do you explain that? What's going on? I thought that your politics, your economics would work if we just tried them. Here we go. We're trying them. Here we tried. What's happening now? You used your wonderful anarcho-capitalist economics, and now the United States has to bail you out for $20 billion because you're so incompetent and your economy is crashing and your government is insolvent? Oh, man. Wow. Incredible. You're just, what an incredible economic ideology you've got here. Only maybe the most unanimously failed economic ideology in the history of humanity. And he crashed it so fast too. Holy shit. He came into the Argentina economy, which was already really bad. And the only thing that could make an economy worse than it already is to do what ANCAPs think you should do with with an economy. Deregulating an economy is the fastest way to destroy your economy, because capitalism encourages these sort of rentier parasite relations where the capitalists just get more and more powerful, and then they essentially just extract everything out of the people, and then you don't have buyers, so you have low velocity of the dollar, and then that means that you just have a poor economy, a flagging economy. So you constantly end up having insolvent companies that go bankrupt because they don't have consumers, because they were so greedy that they destroyed their consumer base. And this just happens every single time you deregulate the economy. Now, ANCAPs, if they had any sense in their heads, they would look at that and they would be like, oh, well, it looks like capitalism doesn't do good at regulating itself. It looks like capitalism is actually, very irresponsible. But no, they don't think that. They say shit like this: that wasn't real anarcho-capitalism. Yeah, I mean, as somebody says, it's never real anarcho-capitalism because capitalism is a product of state intervention. Capitalism can't exist without the state. This is what the ANCAPs just do not understand. So here's the thing. He says, quote unquote, deregulation is bad. Somehow an anarchist who wants government regulation. Yes, insofar as your parasitic system continues to exist, there has to be balances on it. Okay, like, we don't just want a system where psychopaths get to destroy all of society because of this extreme desire for their own empowerment at everyone else's expense. You want a system where there's essentially no reins on how extractors can exploit other people. You essentially want, you are like the equivalent of, during the time of monarchy, just wanting a completely unregulated slave economy. That's essentially what you want in our context. And so we're over here being like, no, there should probably be some regulations on how this all works. If y'all are going to keep keeping slaves, then maybe you shouldn't be able to beat them, and maybe you should have to feed them, and so on and so on. And so it's like, yeah, insofar as capitalism exists, it must be regulated. Otherwise, we just recreate this sort of feudal warring states period. Like, this is just absolutely absurd, and it's not going to work, and it doesn't work. There's no demonstrations of it working. In fact, the only time that power structures ever utilize an anarcho-capitalist framework is when they are trying to create extensive distress so that they can do shock doctrine. It's so destabilizing. An anarcho-capitalist approach is so destabilizing. It's a weapon against foreign adversaries. You literally go to foreign countries and you do what anarcho-capitalists think should be done, and that is so destructive, it destabilizes the entire society, making it easier for you to come in and seize and co-opt it. That is fucking devastating. Like, holy shit, your ideology is so ineffective. Your ideology, your economic conception is so ineffective that doing it is a weapon against the stability of a nation. I'm just blown away by that. And then you're over here being like, yeah, well, I'm sure it can work. We just have to get the state out of it. We just need less checks on our system of rampant exploitation and selfishness. Crazy. Y'all are insane. I don't even understand how you can believe this kind of ridiculous stuff. It's made for people that live in a fantasy world. It really is. It cannot exist in the real world. That's why, real anarcho-capitalism has not existed. Yeah, because anarcho-capitalism can't exist. That's not real. Hey, baby. It can't exist. There is no such thing as anarcho-capitalism. Anarcho-capitalism is a weapon to destabilize nations, and that's all it is. The little kitty was just down there meowing. He was down there meowing. He likes this, though. Yeah, if ANCAPs became mutualists, at least they would be like somewhat living in reality. Then at least there would be some demonstration that they understand how things function. It's so funny because just a few months ago, all the ANCAPs were trying to rub Milei's Argentinian victory in everybody else's faces, being like, yeah, see, we're winning so good. And then just a few months later, it all fell apart. How long has he even been in power? Okay, Milei, when was Milei elected? Let's find out. He was elected in 2023. So November of 2023, just a little over a year. Took him just a little over a year to destroy Argentina such that couldn't even be bailed out by its internal processes. It couldn't even fix itself, you understand? Okay, because that's normal. In capitalism, the capitalists get deregulated, they destroy their economy, then the state has to bail them out. That's normal. This is just the eternal cycle of capitalism. But Milei fucked up his nation so bad. He fucked up his nation so bad that they couldn't even bail out their own economy. They had to go run to the United States to fix their problems. And that is another level of you fucked up your society. Only ANCAPs could manage that kind of miserable fuck up. Truly impressive. Incredibly impressive. But no, it's always funny seeing them come in. They're like, oh man, I'm going to score a dunk on this one. And then it's just like everybody trashing them and they have no response to any of it. All they have is straw men. And honestly, all any ANCAP needs to do, just read some fucking theory. Really just go read the history of how any of these things function. If you want to criticize anarchism, probably you should learn what anarchism actually is. It's hilarious. I mean, ANCAPs would be laughable if they weren't so destructive. They end up in positions of power and then they just destroy everything. They just destabilize economies. That's the only purpose of ANCAPs in society. They are a wrecking ball to stable societies. That's all they are. And they don't ever put anything in place that is a good replacement because their ideology isn't based in reality, isn't based in how anything functions. So they can't create anything that would actually be functional afterwards. They end up in a situation where they always have to run back to the state in order to bail out their miserably failed experiments. Every single time without fail. Argentina did it faster and more intensely than most other ANCAPs would want to do when they had that kind of power. And as a result, they fucked it up so bad they couldn't even bail themselves out. They had to run to a foreign country to get bailed out. That is deeply incompetent and is a clear demonstration of the inviolability of ANCAP ideas. Capitalism does not mean bailing out businesses. No, it does. It does because that's the only way capitalism can work. Capitalism is a fundamentally unstable system. It has to have state intervention. That's the only way it can exist. It came into existence by state intervention with the state, enclosing enormous pieces of land, which had previously been in the commons. So it had to deprive people of the ability to exist off of common ownership. And then after that, it was propped up by state intervention, having enormous cash infusions, doing protectionist trade policies to help the corporations get started in those nations. Capitalism is fundamentally intertwined with the state. There is no such thing as capitalism without the state. That doesn't exist. It's not real. No, I'm not going to kick him. He can stick around. The Darwinist. This is one of the first reasonable responses you've had this whole time. Pretty much everything else you've said has been a bullshit straw man. You said, communists killed farmers, right? They killed millions of farmers. This is the thing. I disavow these people that you're discussing. I disavow authoritarian leftism. And you would know that. I'm sure you do know that. Like, it's not as if you've sat in on numerous ones of these streams. And I assume you're at least familiar with the fact that I've made plenty of videos criticizing authoritarian leftists. That is not my method, and that's not what I believe in. So why do you even bring that up? Do you think that I advocate that, even though I spend all this time telling people I don't advocate that? I'm known as one of the people who's most anti-tanky, as you might say. I'm anti-authoritarian on the left as well. Why are you even bringing that up? Why are you bringing that up? Do you think I support that? I don't. That's one of my main criticisms of them. You think like somebody says, you think I'm Hakeem or something? I'm not going to do apologia for authoritarian leftist regimes. I'm one of their biggest fucking critics on the left. Why do you even bring that up? It's just it just demonstrates. I mean, don't get me wrong. This is a valid criticism. I agree with this criticism. But why do you bring it up to me? What's the point? You didn't even think through the criticism. What's the idea there? I don't get it. The Darwinist says, if you think there are two types of communism, why do you think there's only one type of capitalism? You want me to be open-minded when you aren't. I would believe there were two types of capitalism if I saw that there were two types of capitalism. Okay? There's two types of communism in practice. It's demonstrable, right? I can show you the examples, the CNTFAI in Spain. I can show you a form of libertarian communism with the Zapatistas or with the KPAM or with a variety of examples. There's actual examples of this happening. The system actually existed and it worked. It failed at certain things, but it worked. There is no example of anarcho-capitalism. Capitalism always necessitates a state. Capitalism is a system where class conflict is rife throughout society. It creates divisions and conflicts among the people. Therefore, it has to mediate those conflicts through violence. When you have a system that is built on creating conflicts and inequality, you have to mediate that through violence. Therefore, capitalism necessitates the state. It can't be otherwise. It always will. If it doesn't have the state, it will create a state in order to stabilize itself. Whereas we have demonstration that you don't need a state in order for anarchism to function, in order for libertarian communism to function. We saw it in Catalonia. It happened. It worked. The only reason that it failed was because of external pressures. It didn't fail because of an internal need to create the state. Whereas every example of anarcho-capitalism, it created the state to solve its internal problems. There's a reason for that. So the Darwinists, you say, this is a reasonable response here as well. Okay, I don't know what I said that made you start being reasonable, but you're at least making reasonable points. Okay, you said there is no example of ANCAP, but you could say that about any new invention the day before it's invented. I agree with that. But the thing is that even theoretically, what you're proposing shouldn't work. Like, there's no good reason why it should work. Every single thing about capitalism is built to make your ideology not work. Okay, the only way you don't need a state is if you have a society that is going to follow a common compact where there is agreement about how society should function and where the people themselves can make those decisions. In an ANCAP society, you're going to have enormous inequalities between the people who own everything and make all of their money simply from ownership and the people who have to labor in exchange for a wage. That is an inherent conflict. They have differing desires. Okay, say what you will about Marx. You don't have to like or dislike Marx, but you cannot deny the fundamental principle he's introducing here, which is that the owners of capital have the interest of paying the workers as little as possible while extracting as much labor from them as possible. By contrast, the workers have the interest of working as little as possible while being paid as much as possible. This is undeniable. This is a fact. Okay? And insofar as that is the case, then there will always be conflict between these groups of people. Even if that conflict hits low points and high points, and even if it fluctuates, that is inherent conflict in society. And what you're going to find is without a state, that the masses of people who labor to make society actually function are not going to be okay with a small group of fucking robber barons owning all of the assets in society while doing fucking nothing. That is never gonna work. There's no reason why that should work. You have to be so idealistic. You have to be so delusional to believe that could ever function in a long-term sense. It's always going to erupt in tensions and conflict and probably outright war. Anarcho-capitalism, even if it were to be put in place fully as some of you intend, okay? It wouldn't last because over time, the workers are going to eventually organize together and they're just going to seize the means of production. Because here's the thing I think y'all do not understand. The thing that prevents capitalism from being overthrown today by the workers is the state. The state is capitalism's protector. This is the absurdity. This is the idiocy of anarcho-capitalism. Without the state, y'all have no way to defend yourself from class organization. And I say you, but you're not going to be the owner. You're not going to be the person who owns a massive corporation, but you're going to be a laborer. You understand? If you got your ANCAP utopia, you would live in a fucking wretched company town, getting paid in company scrip, okay? And you would never be able to get out of the company town. You would be an indentured laborer, essentially. And if you were unable to work, then they would just criminalize your homelessness, and they would kick you out in the fucking wilderness so that you could starve to death and die, or they would make you a fucking slave in their company town. Okay? This is the reality of the system that you want. There's no way that's ever going to last without there being revolts. Like, you need the state. You need it. And if you didn't have it, your rulers, the capitalists, they would recreate it. There's nothing to stop them. Nothing to stop them. You know, you talk about how everybody's going to abide by the NAP. Like, how fucking naive is that? Do you really believe that the people with all of the power are just going to abide by some fucking social compact without any repercussions? There's no repercussions if they don't. They're just going to recreate the state apparatus to defend their ill-gotten gains. And you are going to have to live in a society where the capitalists got even more of a head start on accumulating all of the assets of society than they got on this one, which is fucking devastating. Devastating. Why? It's you want your own subjugation. And that's just baffling to me. Baffling that you want your own subjugation. Why do you not want freedom? Why do you not want self-determination? I just don't get it. Like, I know you're so afraid of collaborating with other people. You're so afraid of a democratic process. You're terrified of it. Why are you so terrified of your fellow citizens? You're not terrified of the interests of a few greedy people who are going to accumulate all of the assets of society. How is that not infinitely more terrifying than having to collaborate with your fellow fucking people? Dumbfounding. Once again, anarcho-capitalism is a psyop. It's literally just there to distract y'all. That's all it's there for. There's nothing real about it. Your Lousy says they want the freedom to dominate. I think that is really what it boils down to. You know, if I were being charitable to ANCAPs, here's what I think they imagine. They imagine a society of a bunch of small, medium-sized businesses where a lot of people just make a business living off of their kind of personal labor with maybe like 1 or 2 employees. And there's no big companies, no massive corporations. They just like have this delusion that the market isn't going to allow that to happen. And they imagine, when they think of like freedom, they're imagining like their freedom to go like homestead or whatever, like their freedom from paying taxes, their freedom from regulations and permits and all of that. The thing is that that delusion, that world, that, you know, idealistic view of the world, there's no reason to believe that that would actually perpetuate. That would actually, number one, that it would exist. Because think about it. Okay, we live right now, as it is, with massive corporations. They've got billions of dollars, trillions of dollars of value, okay? These corporations exist, and they're absolutely going to be a part of the process of transition. Amazon's not going away, okay? If there's some transition to an anarcho-capitalist future, Amazon's not going anywhere. Amazon is going to be like a feudal city-state afterwards. They're going to own you and all of those laborers, and they're going to end up becoming a central part of the logistical processes of this future ANCAP society. Things aren't just going to start from scratch magically because you want an ANCAP society, okay? These massive corporations are going to continue existing through the transition, and they are going to become the new lordly dominators in the process. And your fantasy of a bunch of people with small businesses making do is not real. It's not real. It's not going to happen. It's not any more possible in that after that transition than it is right now. Because right now, those massive corporations have all the power, and during the transition, they're going to get more power. More power. They're going to privatize. They're going to get mercenary police forces to defend all of their assets, because in the absence of the state, they're going to need it. They're going to need it. Like, it's so naive. Incredibly naive. And this is the reason I say it's a psyop. It's a psyop because this is only valuable, holding this naive belief is only valuable to the heads of those massive corporations. They want people to engage in this like naive thought experiment, because this naive thought experiment gets people to be complicit in the transition to absolute power to the corporations. But there's no good reason why anybody but the heads of those massive corporations should believe that such a world would be good. It'd be good for them. They'd own everything. They'd be like the new states. Amazon would own massive swaths of land. Google would own massive swaths of land. You wouldn't own shit. You'd be a fucking miserable worker in a company town. That's the reality. Darwinist says, you know why I don't believe ANCOMs are a real thing? You can't really even start your idea that way. And not only are ANCOMs a real thing, we've actually done the things that we propose like that. You can't make the same argument in the opposite direction. You said, because when ANCAPs try to agree with you to end the state, you fight with us over it. You don't want to get rid of the state. That is not true. We understand that so long as capitalism exists, it's good to have antagonistic forces in opposition to other hierarchical forces. We want our enemies to fight our enemies. Okay? Insofar as capitalism continues to exist, the state needs to continue to exist, not only to enable capitalism, but also to regulate it so that we are not all absolutely deprived by the prejudices of the capitalists. The thing is that anarchism isn't just anti-statism. It is anti-hierarchical power. It's anti-domination. You want to just let one of the groups in this system of domination get to become the absolute dominator, the single dominator that rules over all. That is what y'all want. And why would we advocate that? That's absurd. Why would we want the state to stop existing under capitalism? That just means that now we'll be ruled by capitalists. Just in the same way, we wouldn't want capitalism to stop existing under the state. That would just lead to state capitalism. We don't want either of those. Anarchists are real anarchists. We want the abolition of all hierarchical power structures. Yeah, as somebody said, you want to replace the state with corporations. That isn't better. That isn't better. We don't want that. Why would we want that? We're actually in opposition to structures of domination. So why would we want capitalists to replace the state? It's absurd. Absurd.